everybody. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes. It's 6:56, so feel free to grab a quick drink and come back and join us. Hi, and welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name is Maria Spatelnik, and I am here to help you make more quilts in less time with less stress. Quilting for most of us is an escape and a way to relax, and finding ways to make it easier is one of the things that I love to do. I do want to start with a comment about last time. By the way, I start every one of these with a tip. Because as a professional organizer, I do this all the time, and so I like to help people get more organized in their process. So I start with a tip, and then we go on to the project that we're all working on. And I was ill last time, and so I completely forgot part of what I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to start by finishing last time's tip, and then we'll go on to what I had planned for this week. So when I started doing these, the video quality, even though it was the same cameras, was very poor. It basically pixelated me and made me look really blurry. So I'm redoing some of those things that I did then, so we have it in better quality, and then when I make a separate video, it'll look better. So what I talked about last time was folding fabric so that it takes up less space on your shelves, which is what's going on behind me here. This is my yardage on this side. So I have full yards, and then I have my quarters stack, which are in the front here. You can kind of see over here with this orange one behind me here, that they only go half the depth. And so last time I showed how to fold the fabric so that your yardage comes out like this. And I set out to explain why I used the 6-inch ruler instead of a larger one, like an 8.5, that would leave fewer wrinkles in the fabric. And it's as simple as this. I pulled this chicken fabric off the shelf just before we started. And if I was doing a pattern and I was looking in my stash for my material, I would know how much yardage I needed. Now, for a lot of people, they'll either put a piece of tape with the yardage on it, which isn't such a good option because the glue can wind up inside the fabric and it can be very hard to get out, if you can ever get it out at all, depending on how long it sits there. They'll use a safety pin with the amount of yardage on a piece of paper, which means every time you cut something off, you have to remeasure and then relabel and safety pin it. And safety pins can rust if you're someplace that's got a lot of moisture, like Florida or parts of California, for example. Louisiana gets a lot of moisture. So then you wind up with rust and you wind up with other issues. Excuse me, let me move that. So I don't label mine at all. Okay, you can see that. But by using the 6-inch ruler, I know that all of these folded edges are 6 inches or a little bit more. I hope that didn't go on the microphone too bad. 6 inches or a little bit more. So I will take the folded edge and I just count the number of folds. Now you can either open it up into more of a tube and count one side as 1 foot per fold, or I tend to just go all the way across and go, half 1, half 2, half 3, half 4, half 5, half 6, half 7, half 8. That means I have 8 feet of this material. Okay? So I have just under 3 yards, right? 8 feet would be 2 2/3 yards. So depending on how much I need for my quilt, I may already know that this fabric is not going to do because I don't have enough of it. A nice little side benefit is that every time you go around the ruler, you wind up with just a scooch more length in the wrapping. So it gives you a little bit of extra grace when you're trying to figure out if you have enough or not. So that's why I use the 6-inch ruler. So yardage is at least 1 yard that I have full selvage to selvage, and any additional pieces just kind of get folded down and then folded and rolled in, because I want to know I have 1 good solid yard. And so anything with at least a yard is folded and then folded in half like this. If there's somewhere between 1/4 of a yard and a full yard, either selvage to selvage or a fat quarter piece, which is 18 by 22 or more, then you just take this and you fold it in half again, which obviously this is too much for this to do that. But if you look behind me, these are all fat quarters here in the front. And you can tell some of these were cut off the same fabric. But some of them are a lot thicker than others. And it's because there's a bunch of extra material. But if I did something like a stack and whack, or I took long pieces out but I didn't square up the end because I wanted to keep the additional fabric with the main piece, some of these get kind of fat. Maybe it was cut length of fabric, so I don't have selvage to selvage, and I only have 16 inches or 18 inches. And I may have 4 yards of it, but I don't have either a fat quarter or a true quarter yard with the fabric. So those get rolled up the same way. So there's several reasons why something might get folded into a smaller package and be kind of fat. So I know there's a minimum of a 1/4 usable yard, and there could be significantly more. Okay, so that's the yardage that's behind me. And so I took down my design wall so you can see, and I'm going to show you the full wall. There you go. That's my design wall, my fabric stash. And the design walls cover these all up, floor to ceiling. So that blocks the light from the fabric. And I then have a full length design wall, which is really nice to have available. And it's 2-sided, cream on one side, gray on the other. So if I'm doing a predominantly light quilt, I'll put the gray side out. If I'm doing a predominantly medium to dark quilt, then I put like the cream side out. So I can see better with my contrast depending on which way I flip the boards. So you can see I've got some empty space here. Sorry, over on this side you can see some over here with the green. And then you can also see that I have some empty space down here behind me. This fabric, only the yardage, not even the fat quarters, because the quarter yards. The quarter yards were over on the wall on this side that you can't see. By just folding my fabric willy-nilly, I completely filled floor to ceiling. And didn't even have the quarter cuts. So by folding it, by wrapping it around the ruler, and then folding it in half for the yardage and quarters for the smaller pieces, I got not only the fat quarters and quarter yards from over there onto the wall, but I actually have extra space. Most of my clients save somewhere around 20% versus the old-fashioned just fold it in half, fold it in half, fold it in half, kind of try to get it down to about a specific, should fit on the shelf without oozing off size. So this is how it is. Now I used to organize it by color going this way across instead of up and down. But because of the design wall, I had to change it, because if I wanted a blue fabric, I would have to take down all the design walls to shop my blue section. Whereas now I can just take off the last one and maybe the one next to it, but usually just the last one, and I can see all of my blue fabrics in all sizes. The exception to that is that the quarter yard cuts are often stacked too deep, just so that I have some more flexibility. I could go completely to the floor and use up this empty space I have down here, and then have my quarter yards only one layer deep. But I'm okay with having them doubled up, so that's what I do. I do try to put, if I know I have a bunch, because I wind up with a lot of the same fabrics in smaller pieces, because a fabric line might be popular, a particular fabric might be popular, and so a lot of people give me that particular fabric. So I wind up with chunks of it in all different sizes. If I have a couple of them that are at least the quarter yard, I'll try to put the second one behind, just so that I can see more of the variety in the front. But it doesn't always happen, like these pinks right behind my head here, up this side. These light pinks here are all the same fabric. They just didn't get moved to the back. So that's the thing for the yardage. So I'm going to scooch back in. There I am. Okay. So now let's talk about, okay, you have finished your quilt. You have taken any pieces that are a yard or more that are left over, and you've folded them like this. You've taken anything that's between a quarter and a half, and you folded it in half again to make the fat quarters, like these orange ones right here. But what if it's less than a quarter yard or a fat quarter? This is where I start subcutting. Now, I really dislike pressing. I do. Ironing, pressing, whatever you want to call it, for whatever it is that you're doing. So the less of it I can do, the happier I'm going to be. So what I do is when I'm done with my project, since I keep everything flat and ironed while I'm working on my project, rather than just tossing it willy-nilly into a basket and then having to, take it out, iron it, and then cut whatever pieces I need for the next project, I cut it into smaller pieces right then and there. So the first thing I do is I'll take this big piece and I will cut strips first. So a strip to me, let me get a bigger one, is any piece that's at least, and you can, hold on, let me get this open. It's giving me trouble, sorry. It's at least 12.5 inches long. Okay? Now, to be honest with you, 12.5, it's an okay size. If I were starting back at the beginning, I might have gone with a 14, just to give me a little more flexibility. But I picked 12.5 because that's the size my ruler is. So I would just plop down my 12.5 inch ruler on my table, and then I just lay the fabric on there. Okay, what's longer than this, and cut the biggest piece I can that's longer than 12.5 inches long. I do stop at 6.5 inches. Now, most people are not going to use fabric the way that I use fabric. So my recommendation to you is that you not cut every size that I cut. I would recommend that what you do is you think about what pieces you use the most. Do you like to use pre-cuts? So 2.5, 5, 7, 10? Then that's the size you cut your fabric. Okay? If you like to use 3.5 and 4.5, if that's the size you find yourself cutting all the time, then cut those. So maybe you cut 2 4.5s, and then a 2.5, and then, you know, you say everything else gets subcut. That's perfectly fine. Okay? So what you use should be what you cut. For most people, 2.5 is a great size. 5 is also good. You can always cut it down further, but, you know, it depends on what you use the most. I'm cheap, so I use every inch, but I like a wide variety of sizes. So I cut from 1 to 6.5 every ½ inch. So I have the 1-inch raw strips. They're in this top drawer over here. Yeah, you can see it. These are 1.5s. And then I go all the way to 6.5s over there. So think about what size you use the most, and that's what you cut down to. Once you've got it to where you've gotten your 12.5-inch strips, however wide they are, then you're still going to have some pieces left. So I cut the largest pieces that I can out of that, and I will make blocks. So this, for example, is my drawer, one of my drawers of 2-inch blocks. Okay? Now, there are hundreds in this one drawer. Okay? It's not a big drawer. It doesn't look like it holds all that much, but there's about 50 per stack. Okay? And you can see there's a lot of stacks in there. So if I wanted to make a quilt, I could make most of a quilt just from what I have in this drawer. Okay? And I have multiple drawers because the 2-inch is something I use quite a bit. Again, use the sizes, cut the sizes that you like to use. If you're a Charm Pack fan, there's no reason you can't cut almost everything at 5 inches. Now, I cut from 1-inch raw, little itty bitties that finish at a half, all the way up to 12.5. Why 12.5? It's the size of my ruler. Okay? And so I'll use the bigger ones either if I'm going to be doing a disappearing block, or I'm going to want to do a giant star in the middle of something, or I just want to put them all together and make them a back. I do that. I'll take a bunch of my strips and I'll just join them end to end and have a variety of widths so that my back has, you know, a 6.5 and then a 2 and then a 4 and then a 5.5 and then whatever. As long as they all make one long strip, then I can sew them together and now I've got a stripy back, which sometimes it's kind of nice to flip the quilt over and have a different look for a different period of time. I have done that with guests and I think I made them a new quilt. But one of the nice things about it is that it's not uncommon for me to have a quilt that, for my guest bed, that might be a little on the more feminine side. And then if my son, who's 26, has guy friends over, I flip it over and I have more masculine, strong colors, football themes, you know, that kind of stuff on the back side. They don't know the difference. They just think there's a really cool quilt on the bed for them. So that's just something too. You can make a his and hers kind of quilt, so that depending on who your guest is which side you flip it up, and you don't have to have two quilts. So just as a thought. Okay, so today's topic is going to be about storing these strips and blocks that you've cut. Now, you saw me take these drawers. They come usually 3 drawers. I don't know why it only looks like 2 there, but there's 3 drawers. There we go. There we go. 1, 2, and 3. These 3-drawer units, you can find them in Walmart, Target, anywhere you go practically, and they're you can get them at they're either Rubbermaid or Sterlite is one of the real common ones. Some of the knockoff brands at like the dollar stores tend to fall apart faster. So I'm kind of a fan of the Sterlite, but that's me. You can get stacking shoe boxes that are drawers. The reason I use drawers instead of just shoe boxes or bins is that it always seems to me that whatever I need is going to be in the bottom bin. Even if I took it out yesterday, I worked on a project and then I put it back in the top bin. If I come back tomorrow, somehow it's always on the bottom. So you have to unstack and restack and unstack and restack. And for a lot of us, we can unstack. We tend to not restack as well as we should. So then we're either tripping over it while we're trying to do other things, like go downstairs and get lunch, or it's just adding to the chaos in the room. So either, if you're going to use totes or anything like that, either commit that you will, as soon as you unstack it and find what you need, that you're going to restack, or go with drawers. Because it's really handy to just say, okay, I need, let's say let's say this was 1, 2, and 3 inches. I need a 3-inch block. Instead of having to unstack and open, I could just pull out the 3 inches and then put them back. Okay? Life's much easier, and you just take the whole drawer with you to where it is you're working. Maybe you want to pin together 4 patches for the project that we're doing, or you want to do something else. Maybe you want to mark and make half square triangles, or whatever it is you want to do. You can just pull that size out and deal with it, and then just slide your leftovers back into the holder, and you're done. Now this is one of the ones that's a little bit on the smaller side. It'll hold a full sheet of paper, but that's about it in terms of the inside measurements. They make the same things for scrapbookers that hold 12.5-inch sheets. So my pieces that are over 8.5 inches wide are in the bigger drawers. So that's something to consider as well. And what's nice is I just have rows of drawers on the wall that's behind where you're sitting right now. And they've got blocks and bricks, and it's got supplies and things like scissors, and I can see stitch witchery, and a whole bunch of stuff like that is all in drawers. Everything's labeled, everything's easy to find, it's all neat, and whatever I need is a grab and go. Now, let me see if I can turn this so you can see. The blue cart here that I pulled the strips from, I don't know if you can, yeah, you can't see it very well. Hold on, let me see if I do the white, if you can see it better. Yeah, here it is. This one actually rests on the floor, and it has 6 small drawers in it. Some of the ones I have only have 3, and they're much larger drawers. So the nice thing about that is, since I do a lot of strip work, I can get a little bit bigger pile going and then sew it when I'm ready. So my general rule of thumb is, when I can't close a drawer anymore, I have to make my next quilt, has to be something that's going to use my stash in that size. So that kind of forces me to either try to come up with some new designs or to at least sew down my stash. The thing is that since I'm a scrap quilter and people know me, I'm gifted fabric all the time. I will find trash bags of fabrics on my front porch that people leave, usually anonymously. I think it's because people don't want other people to know just how much they have. But in a normal year, which this last year has not been, but in a normal year, I can sew a lot of quilts using the methods that I use. And I will turn all of this in under 2 years normally. Okay? This is about 100 quilts behind me, maybe a little bit more. But it's because of the techniques I use and some specific designs that I use. And I do that mostly for things like hurricane relief, that kind of stuff. It's not uncommon for me to knock out between 10 and 20 quilts in a weekend if I'm dedicated to it. So, that makes a huge difference in how quickly I can get through my stash. Most people are never going to go through this much fabric in the rest of their lives. So if you don't have this kind of a setup, don't worry about it. You're closer to normal than I am. Okay? But I do like the fact that I have a lot of options. And because people gift me fabric I would never purchase in a million years, I look at some of this and I'm like, really? Somebody paid for this. Somebody designed this. Somebody printed this. Okay, now how am I going to use it? And it's not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just not in my comfort zone. So I am constantly being pushed out of my comfort zone, which for me is kind of fun. It's kind of like getting shoved into a pool. You're scared because you've been shoved and you're falling, but you're also okay because you know you're going to land in the pool. You know, you're not going to crack your head on anything. You're just going to splash and everybody's going to laugh and everybody's going to have a good time. So, although it's nervousness making sometimes, it feels really good and it's a safe place to be because I'm in my quilting room. How much trouble can I get into, really? Okay, that's a bad question, but you know what I mean. So, that's one of the reasons why I get gifted so much and why I have such a big system. Everything that I get gets washed in hot, dried on high, and then it's folded. I used to iron everything before I rolled it, and I've decided it just wasn't worth the time to me to do that. So I will roll it before I press it, which means it will need to be ironed later. But I can take a chunk of it, what I know that I'm going to need, tear that off, and then iron that piece. Or I'll iron the whole thing then, because now I'm in the creative mood and I'm kind of more ready to do that than I might be just at 2 in the morning sometime if I can't sleep. And another reason I like to pre-prep stuff like squares is if I can't sleep, I have something I can do that's ready to go. So over here, and some of you may have seen this already, I have a shoebox. And in my shoebox are my leaders and enders. And sometimes I won't use that. Sometimes I'm just in the mood to sew and I don't want to have to think about it. This isn't going to be something I'm trying to design that's going to be fancy. It's not something that I know is going to take a big amount of time. I just want to sew. And when that happens, what I do is I'll just go and grab maybe 2 inches, 2.5, 5 inches, whatever size I feel like working with. Start putting pairs together and 4 patches together, or flying geese, or half square triangles, or one of the things that I collect in my orphan section that I know that I'm going to have the ability to cut down to whatever size I need when the time comes. Because if you sew a 4 patch, either as a leader and ender, or just because you need to sew something, when it's time to actually make that quilt, you will have done up to 1/3 of the sewing already when you sit down to do it. Because in doing a 4 patch, you have to sew 2 short seams and a longer seam in order to get that 4 patch. That takes time. So if you already have them done, you've got nothing to worry about. You're already 1/3 of the way done with your quilt, because now I've got bigger pieces that I'm assembling. The hardest part with quilting is, especially when you use small pieces like I do, is it seems like you've sewn forever and gotten nowhere, because you've sewn and you've sewn and you've sewn and you've sewn, and you've pressed in between, and then you've trimmed, and this is what you got out of it. Okay? This is a 1.5 inch 4 patch. Here we go. Maybe you can see it better. Maybe if I switch it like it's halfway between my shirt and my neck. Okay? A 1.5 4 patch. This takes a long time to assemble for something eeny weeny teeny. As your quilt progresses, your pieces get bigger, you see more results in less time, it starts to feel better and better and better, and you feel more and more productive. It's because you've already pre-sewn a whole bunch of this stuff. Now that you're in the final assembly phase, it goes very quickly. So if you can assemble these as leaders and enders, or you can do it as just a, fried brain project, then you're not going to mess up your important thing that you're doing, like the wedding quilt you're making or the baby quilt or whatever else it is that you're doing that you really need to be able to give your time and attention to. But now you're ready to go. And you've gotten so much of the work done and it didn't feel like that. You were just in autopilot and just sewing stuff together. So it makes a big difference. So that's the tip for today. Now, so I've been unpacking the boxes from my mother's house. My mom died a year this last July. And so I've been unpacking the kitchen, and I thought I would just share this mug. It's actually going to wind up being donated, but at the time I wasn't making the world's best decisions. So when in doubt, I kept things knowing that I would be doing another cull as I unpacked. But I just thought this was funny, and I hope you can see this. It says, "Born free, now I'm expensive." I held this up to my husband, and it's also a huge mug. And so he's like, "Yeah, if I'm going to fill that with hot chocolate, you've got like 3 cups worth of hot chocolate in there." I'm like, "That sounds about right." But I just thought I'd share that for the fun of it. Okay, so back to our project. Actually, before I do that, if you enjoy watching any of this craziness that goes on here, please do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, the bell if you want to know when I'm going to be either live stream or when a video is going to go up. The original plan was that I would edit the live streams down into short little videos. That's going to come later. I figured January is usually pretty slow for me in the organizing biz. You would think it would be really, really busy because of people making resolutions to get organized. But people are resolving to organize themselves usually. So January is usually pretty slow for me. And then we start to pick up in February and March. I got COVID. And I was miserable for 3 weeks. So I pretty much lost all of the editing time that I had planned on in January. So I'm going to continue to try and do some things and get them up there as separate videos. I will leave the live streams up until the videos are made from them that I'm going to do, and then I'll take them down. But just so you know, for the most part, I'm going to do videos of all the little tips that I've done up front, and then if anything is going on in the course of the rest of the hour, in a project like this one that we're doing together, then I'll pull those little pieces out too as separate videos, and then I'll just trash the live stream. But as of right now, there's a ton of live streams to go back to. I started this, I think, in June, and I do it the first and third Wednesday of every month. So there's a bunch of them up there that I just haven't gotten edited. So please forgive. And also the ones at the beginning, please forgive the quality. But hopefully you'll enjoy them. But what we're doing now as a group is I offered 4 different kinds of quilts to the group. And then I asked people to email me at this email address up here, right? mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com. And tell me what their preference was. Now, the actual website is down. Unfortunately, my husband is doing taxes right now, so he can't get it fixed. As soon as he can get it fixed, I'll let you know. I do have some patterns for sale. I have some free patterns. I have some other stuff up on the website. The email works either way. So please, please email me. You can also leave notes in the chat, and I will see them later. I can see them now, but since there's nobody on except for me and one other person, and I know who that is, I'm not getting anything in the chat right now. But if you send something in later, that's fine too. So I respond to those in the next live stream, like, why did I say the 6-inch ruler? Okay. But I gave 4 choices. And it was a traditional block, a beginner block, a really wild 3D modern block, a quilt, these are all quilts, or a quilt using 4 patches. And the idea is that we're going to cut the 4 patches wonky. And that's going to be our quilt for this year. Because I'm going to do it with you right here, right now. We're going to talk about design options, etc. The group chose the 4 patches. So, I tried to explain some of this last time. It didn't come out as clearly as I would have liked, but again, I was half dead. So, so I did put it off until this week to talk a little bit more about what our options are. when I picked the 4 categories, I had no designs in mind. I just picked 4 categories that I thought people might be interested in. So what I've done since the last live stream is I've done some pre-sorting, I'm not done yet, of my 4 patches, and I've done some designs. And so I'm going to go over the designs with you today, and then you will have 1 week from today, and today is January 19th, 2020. So by midnight, Wednesday night of next week, I need you to send me an email and tell me which of these you are the most interested in, and majority will rule. And then that's the one that we will come up with a final pattern for and move forward. Now, I encourage you to do this with me. However, you're going to have different scraps than 4 patches and numbers of them, and you might not want to make the size I'm making or whatever. So I'm also going to talk about ways to vary the pattern so that everybody can kind of follow along, and you do whatever of it you want to do. Okay? So let's switch over here first. So these are some of my scrap 4 patches, my orphan 4 patch blocks. These ones I haven't sorted yet. You can see the painter's tape. This is 1, 2, and 3. That's the size that I can cut from these 4 patches. So if I take this, if I was just squaring this up, I don't know if you can see that, that would be a 3.5 inch 4 patch. But that's not what we're doing. We're going to make them go wonky. So in this case, if I spin this like this, I can just get, hold on, where is it? There it is, there it is. Okay, I can get a 2.5 inch raw 4 patch out of this. So you need a bigger 4 patch to start with than the wonky ones we're going to have. Now, the cool thing about this is that if you've sewn together things that aren't regular, like this, okay, they're wider than they are long, it doesn't matter in this process because I'll put my 2.5 inches wherever I want it. So it might go here, it could go over a little further, it might be rotated more or less. You could do it where your 4 patch is just slid off like that. Okay, so maybe not truly wonky, but offset. So I did have one person say to me, can I just offset them instead of having them on an angle, just have the center moved over to the edge? Sure. The only thing you can't do is have it moved over so far that you're within your 1/4 inch here, because at that point you have a 2 patch that you're looking at. I would recommend no less than a 1/2 inch on the side so that a 1/4 inch of it will show. But that's completely up to you. Okay? Now some of these I've sewn out of other scraps that I pulled, like this one. This one's really out of whack because this was a strip set. And so I just cut the 2 ends that I had, and I rotated one and I sewed them back together into a 4 patch. So that's why there's these tails on here. But I didn't trim them because I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And I might have decided to turn this into maybe coins, elongated coins like this instead. So I just left it alone. I didn't trim it down. I usually don't trim something like this until I know what I'm going to do with it. So in this case, these are 3 inches. Now, I got another 2 emails. Let me go back to the view where you can see me. I got another 2 emails from people who said, I don't want to do 1 inch blocks. 1 inch 4 patches are tiny and it'll take me forever. Okay, you don't have to. Because I was originally talking designs using a ton of 1 inchers. And that's not for everybody. So the designs that we're going to talk about today, I pretty much started at 2 inches. I have some 1 inches, but it's pretty much starting at 2 inches. Now, if I have 4 1 inch blocks that I want to put together into a 2 inch block and then put that in to add, pops of extra interest, you certainly can. You don't have to take what's listed as an 8 inch twisted 4-patch and leave it like that. You can subdivide it. You can do it as an improv block. You can do practically anything you want with this design and it'll work. Okay? So if you don't want to do 1 inches, you don't need to do 1 inches. And so I have done some of these redesigns back using 2 inches as my minimum size, but I may substitute 4 1-inchers to make a 2 occasionally, just to kind of add a little extra pop in a few places. But I might not. Who knows? This is very, very relaxed what we're doing here. Okay? So let's get back to the drawing board. Literally. Okay. Now, one thing that I do like to do is I'll grab some of my 4-patches. Now this one got kind of mangled in the course of the week in terms of being all wrinkled, so I apologize about that. They're normally stored flat, and so they stay, you know, like these ones. They stay nice and neat, even if they're not lined up perfectly and squared out. If you're wondering what'll fit, I like having a variety of blocks. A variety of rulers. So this is a 6.5. So if I wanted to do, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 6, or something like that, and I'll show you a couple of options of that, I certainly could. And I know that whatever it is I put on here, this is more than large enough to handle. But if I want to do 8-inch blocks instead of 6-inch blocks, if I plop this on here, I can see I can only get it rotated just so far. Here's my straight line here before I'm going to run out of fabric. Okay, so cutting a few of this might work, but I might need some bigger blocks to make 8-inch finished twisted 4-patches. Okay, so that comes down into when I'm looking at my stash and I'm plopping this with a ruler on it. I'm like, okay, can I get 3.5 out of this? Yep, here's one, here's one. Now, if it's not the full size, like this is a full 8.5, what you can do, where did I put my tape? Here it is. You can flip your ruler over and take a little bit of painter's tape. You don't even have to do the whole line. 1, 2, 3. Let's say we want to do a 4.5. I can just, even with the good grips on the back, because I'm not going to the edge, it's not going to pull the good grip stuff off. I can just do this, because I want a 4-inch finish, so that's 4.5 raw, right? Can you see that on there? So here's my 4.5-inch corner. And then if I, let me get a bigger square. That's not going to work on those, they only fit 3s. Okay, so here's a bigger square. Now it's almost the same as if I had a ruler that size. Okay, I can spin it around and go, yep, I'm going to fit. I can do, on this 4-patch, I can make my 4.5-inch. I can skew it to the side like this if I want to and get my 4.5. Okay, and so it's a very quick way to double check what size you can get out of the 4-patches that you already have made. So what I did was, let me put this back over here, is I subdivided each of the categories into 3 different categories. So this is white and white-ish. So although this is not a pure white block, it's mostly white. Okay? So it could be a very pale blue. It could be a white on white. It could be almost anything. But it's white-ish, cream, that kind of thing. I have a black because I do a lot of sewing with black. And black-ish. It could be very dark gray. It could be gray and black. It could be white and black, but mostly reads as black. Okay, so these definitions are not set in stone. And then back here are the everything else. So those are both strong purples, strong greens, you know, so that it's not either of the other 2 categories. Because I'm trying to decide how I want to do this quilt. Do I want it to be mostly white and the pops of colors? Do I want that black for that strong contrast? You can tell I move things around. Sorry, this goes there. This one goes there. Do I want that really intensity of the black? Or do I want something a little more in the more medium range, not too bright, not too dark. So when I'm looking at these and I'm looking at how many of things I have, that's going to help me make my final decision, because the goal of this project is to get rid of the orphans. Now, if you look here, all of these are the same. Okay? This is actually from a quilt that I had this whole plan and changed my mind. And so these are all got taken apart again. You can even see the seam line right there. So I have a ton of these. This is too much to put into my quilt, because unless that's part of the theme, it would just overpower everything else, because it's bright and there's just so much of it. So for this project, I wouldn't take more than 4 for the entire quilt. And I'm probably going to try to make it so I only have 1 of each thing, maybe 2. Now, I'm going to make some mistakes. I'm going to think I didn't have a fabric and come to find out I did. It was in there. Okay, that happens. Not a big deal. Okay? But I have my 1-inchers here, these 3 piles to the left. These are my white, black, and mixed. And then for my 3s over here on the right, white, black, and then I have 2 piles of mixed back here. And then this is the stack I was just sitting down to sort when it was time to start this. Okay? So first I want to see, okay, what have I got? Okay, you see I have a bunch of 1-inchers, but I don't have hundreds of them. I mean, this isn't all of them by any stretch, don't get me wrong. There's a lot more than what you're seeing here, because I only just started this. But, okay, if I'm not going to use the 1-inches, then those could just go away. And I'd be looking at the 2s, maybe the 3s, and then the 4s, 6s, and 8s. So it's going to narrow things down. So what do? Let's say you don't have enough. You've decided that you're going to do the same quilt that I'm going to do, whatever it is. And so let's say you need 48 4-inch blocks. And you have 21. You have a couple choices. You can make more 4 patches and cut them wonky. You can also look at your quarter square triangles, because a quarter square triangle is basically just a 4 patch, but it's done on the diagonal like this. That's a quarter square triangle, right? Or an hourglass block, whichever way you want to call it. But you can cut this wonky too. So if you have these in your stash, they're just the same as a 4 patch. So you can pull these out too. You can put a solid block in. There is no rule that says that just because I'm doing this with all 4 patches, because I'm trying to create kind of a confetti effect, kind of like you're looking into a hole and the confetti is exploding out because they get bigger as they come out. But you don't have to do that. You know, you can put in solids and just have a few 4 patches in various places, either clustered or singled. You can take, like I said, maybe an 8-inch block and put, you know, a couple of different 2-inch blocks in it, random, and then piece that into an 8-inch block. I mean, there's no limit to what you can do with this. So I want you to keep your mind open while you're following along, that just because I'm doing it this way and I've created this particular pattern does not mean that you're limited to it. And just like on the pattern, it may start with 2-inch blocks and be, let's say, a 64-inch square. If I cut everything in half, so I have 1-inch blocks and then 2-inch blocks and then 4-inch blocks, and that's where I stop, mine will be half the size. Maybe that's what I want to do. So this is still incredibly flexible. So feel free to just go crazy with it and do whatever it is that you want. I would love it if you would email me photos if you're doing this with me, or even just let me know that you are, and if any problems have come up or you want help with your final design, anything like that. But look and see what you've got first, and then figure out, well, if I want to go the all 4 patch route, then how many of which sizes do I need? And so how many 4-patches do I need to make that I'm then going to cut up? Now, one of my friends was dinging me about this the other day. She says, so once you've cut these wonky blocks, what are you going to do with the scraps? Because she knows me. Once you've cut off a couple of triangles like here and here, right? So let's imagine that these are two separate pieces, here and here. She knows me. I'm probably going to put them together and make a 4-patch in the middle. That's going to already be skewed a little bit. Or I will put them into a long strip of miscellaneous blocks of scraps that will ultimately be turned into a strip in a quilt. Or I will put them together into what I call a chip block. Some people call it crumbs, but I've been calling it chip block for, I don't know, well more than a decade. So I haven't made the conversion yet. Because I have some that are 2 inches that have like 50 fabrics in them. And then you treat that just like a regular block. And so you can insert that anywhere. So if I do one, let's say it's a 6.5 inch square, I could do the 5 square flying goose method and have 4 geese with chip block big triangles that it will add extra pop to my quilt. So, I mean, and it looks like you spent forever, paper piecing or doing something to make these, when really it's another one of those things, just like the 4-patches I was talking about, that it's, I just want to sew. And so I'll go to my barrels of scraps. I save the barrels that cheese balls come in, because my husband loves to eat cheese balls. And occasionally, and well, he likes them all the time, but I'll occasionally take one of the barrels, wash it out, dry it, and use it for scraps. And I'll just reach in and pull out the next contrasting fabric that comes out of it, and I'll sew them together. You can either do it on newsprint, or you can do it on cash register tapes, or you can just freeball it. But if you don't have something you're attaching it to of a specific size, you're much more likely for it to go all wonky and ripple and not be as useful. So that's why I'll use either old phone books, and I'm sorry that this is doing this, I don't know why it is, either old phone books or the cash register tape. I got the cash register tape idea from Karen Brown of Get It Done Quilts. I love her Color Theory series, and she has some wonderful tips on there. So she always does the register tapes, so I have a few here, okay? And this is actually ones I cut out of newsprint. And you start in the middle, and you just add to both sides, and then you can press a whole bunch of these all at once, and then you add the next one on each side, and the next one, the next one, the next one, so that you can do a whole bunch of them before you need to go to the machine, to the ironing board. Because I do very little pressing up here. Most of it I take downstairs in a big bin, and I do it in front of the TV when I'm sitting down there with my husband. Then I bring things back up here to actually sew them together. So we have 10 minutes left because I talk a lot. And let's talk designs. Okay, so let's go back to that camera. So this is one I had great hopes for. And the idea was that we would start with the 2-inch blocks in 2 curves, and then we would fill in with 3s and 4s until we got to the outer edges. And it's really cool. The problem is that I'm not sure that this is something that anybody could follow along with, because it would all depend on exactly where your curve was and how deep it was and what sizes you were using. And so it would get really difficult. Plus, you have to add in all these little 1-inchers. Let me see if I can get this closer. I don't want to make anybody ill or seasick, so I apologize if I do. Yay! Okay. So these are little 1-inch blocks. So in order to make them all come out even, because they're all different sizes, You'd have to add in all of these little random ones, and I thought that that would be a little bit too hard to follow in this kind of a setting. So this might someday be something that I do and then turn into a pattern, but you'll know exactly what you need to do in order to make it work. And this will be a pretty high level for piecing, because there's a lot of things you'd have to have intersect. So I talked about this one. I was really hot about this one, but I do not think that this is going to work for this group. And so I apologize, but I do want to let you know that I had done the work to see what it would entail. Okay. Huh. I just got a notice saying there's not sufficient disk space to continue recording. So I'm going to keep going, and then I'll see what's happening later, okay? So this is a design where, actually, I don't know if you can actually see that. Let me see if I can close this. Okay. So on this design, I did 3, 4, and 6-inch blocks. And the idea is, hold on. As you go out, something to watch for is that you're going to have seams coming in the middle of some blocks and then matching on some blocks. Now, these diagonal lines are only here because I was thinking of them for potential quilting ideas, and I wanted to know if the designs would match in the middle, or, for example, on this one, where they would make this overlap, or if they just wouldn't line up at all because the math was off. So this is definitely doable. 2, 4, and 6. That would give us a 48 by 72. You need 144 2 inches, 72 4 inches, and 48 6-inch blocks. So not a bad option. Now this is one that I did that was 2, 3, and 4. So if you had a lot more of the small blocks, you could go ahead and do this, and you'd still have offsets here. So you can see here, this is a third of the way into the 3-inch block, 2/3 of the way through, and then they line up again. This is something where you could do the diagonal lines, but you are going to get this interesting diamond in the middle, or you just don't do this particular set. I was just trying to figure out how to use the squares that were there to do your initial diagonal lines, so that it would be easier to do either more diagonals or just something different in the rest of it. So this is a 2, 3, and 4. In order for this to line up for most of them, we would have to have one row of 1-inch blocks at the top and one at the bottom. Otherwise, it's completely off and they don't line up. And then I said, okay, what if instead of 6, what if we went to 8? Oops, let me turn this right side up. So this one is 48 by 72. It has 144 2-inch blocks in the middle. And then, hold on, let me go up a little bit. It'll be easier to see. Oh, I gotta switch to the other. There's a delay, just so you know. There's a delay from when I record things and to when you see them. So if I'm looking at YouTube for any questions or anything, I'm on a delay. So that's why I get myself discombobulated sometimes. Okay, so if we did 144 2 inches, then we would have 44 4s and 34 8s. Gives us, again, 48 by 72. If we wanted to do a square using 2 4s and 8s, this is our most space efficient in terms of how many things we have. 64 2 inches, 48, and 48. Again, if we cut the sizes in half down to the 1-inch size, like you can see here, then it would be a 32-inch square hanging. So if you wanted to do something smaller, this would be an option. Now, one of the other things we had talked about was doing something like this where it's a 1/2 inch increment in sizes, where it starts with 1-inch blocks and then it goes to 1.5 inch blocks and then 2-inch blocks, 2.5, and then 3. And so that is definitely doable. It's a 63-inch square, gone this far. But let me turn this right side up. You can see it better. We would need 36 1-inch squares, 128 1.5s, 175 2 inches, 180 2.5s, and 185 3-inch blocks. And when I was looking at that, I was thinking that this would be really cool, and I think the final result would be stunning. I'm happy to do it, but I don't know that there's going to be very many people with that many squares, 4 patches ready. So in this case, I think we would need to do a lot more solids and sprinkle the 4 patches in, which is not going to give us the confetti effect. So if this is the one that you want, we can certainly do that. I'm just letting you know that there is a potential drawback just in the fact that it will be hundreds and hundreds of squares to get a 63-inch square. It's not going to be the 48 by 72, which would be more for a bed size or lap size. So it's completely up to you guys. I just wanted to point that one little thing out. So let's get back to this. So our options. And so let me put this out here. I'm going to give you 5. And I'm going to pull this up so that hopefully you can see them all. Okay. So option number 1 is this one. It's 2, 4, and 6 inch, and they run top to bottom. Okay. Option number 2 is 2, 3, and 4 running top to bottom with some 1s. There'd be 16 1-inch blocks at the very top and the very bottom here to make the size fit. Option 3 is 2, 4, and 8 in a long 48 by 72. Option 4 is the 64-inch square using 2, 4, and 8-inch blocks. And then option 5 is the 1/2 inch increment 63-inch quilt. So, like I said, this is the one that will be the most work in terms of being able to put it together, just because there will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, I would say around 800 squares needed to do this one. And they have to be in the right sizes, so they'd be making a bunch more blocks in order for this one to work. So those are your 5 choices. Now this should all be on the live and recorded there, at least, even though I won't have a recording of it. But please take a look at this. 1, 2, so the stripies, okay, the 2 rings, and these are all in full inches, and then this one is the 1/2 inch. If you are determined that you want to see this one done, I am willing to try that on my own and make it a pattern for the future. But I don't, like I said, I don't think that's one for us to do now. But if you'd really like to see it done anyway, just let me know and I will add it to my list. Okay? So those are our 5 options for this time, well, by midnight next Wednesday, to have it emailed to me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com. Give me your choice, and then when we meet next time, we will start cutting the squares, the 4 patches into the right size squares, and planning our assembly Okay, so we're going to start the pattern making process as well. So have a good time. I will see you the first and third Wednesday of every month. And so it's time to relax. Let's go sew. Bye-bye.